In 1929, a group of historians working in the Topkapi Palace Library in Istanbul made a discovery that would puzzle scholars for decades. Hidden among thousands of dusty manuscripts and forgotten documents, they found a fragment of an ancient map drawn on gazelle skin. The map was dated to 1513 and signed by an Ottoman admiral named Piri Reis, a renowned cartographer and naval officer who had compiled geographical knowledge from numerous sources. At first glance, it appeared to be just another 16th century map of the Atlantic Ocean, showing the coasts of Europe, Africa, and the newly discovered Americas. But when scholars examined it more closely, they noticed something impossible. The southern portion of the map appeared to show a coastline that shouldn't exist on any map from 1513. It looked remarkably similar to the northern coast of Antarctica, a continent that wouldn't be officially discovered until 1820, over 300 years later. Even more baffling, the coastline seemed to show the land beneath the ice, features that modern science didn't map until the 1950s using sophisticated seismic equipment. How could a 16th century map show a continent that hadn't been discovered yet, and more impossibly, show it without the miles-thick ice sheet that has covered it for millions of years? The Piri Reis map immediately captured imaginations. Some claimed it was evidence of an ancient advanced civilization with sophisticated mapping technology. Others suggested it proved that Antarctica was ice-free in recent history, perhaps just a few thousand years ago, and that unknown explorers had mapped it before the ice returned. The most extreme theories proposed alien intervention or lost knowledge from Atlantis. But as with most historical mysteries, the truth is far more complex and far more interesting than simple sensationalism. To understand what the Piri Reis map really shows, and what it tells us about Renaissance cartography and the nature of geographical knowledge, we need to examine the map itself, understand how it was made, and separate fact from fiction. First, let's establish what we actually know about the map. Piri Reis was a real historical figure, a Turkish admiral and cartographer who lived from 1465 to 1553. He was well-educated, well-traveled, and had access to extensive collections of maps and geographical texts from across the Mediterranean world. In 1513, he compiled his famous map as part of a larger world map that is now lost. Only about 1/3 of the original map survives, showing the Atlantic Ocean and the coastlines of Western Europe, Northwestern Africa, and Eastern South America. In notes written on the map itself, Piri Reis explicitly states that he used approximately 20 source maps to create his compilation, including maps captured from Spanish sailors, Portuguese charts, and even a map that supposedly came from Christopher Columbus himself. The controversial section is the southernmost portion of the map, which extends beyond the known coast of South America and shows a landmass continuing to the east. Some researchers, particularly Charles Hapgood, an American historian who studied the map intensively in the 1960s, argued that this southern landmass represented Antarctica and that the coastline matched the subglacial topography of Queen Maud Land, the section of Antarctica that would be directly south of the Atlantic Ocean. Hapgood's claims were popularized in his 1966 book, Maps of the Ancient Sea Kings, where he argued that the map must have been based on ancient sources dating back thousands of years to a time when Antarctica was ice-free. But there are serious problems with this interpretation. First, Antarctica has not been ice-free for at least 14 million years. Geological and glaciological evidence is overwhelming on this point. Core samples taken from Antarctic ice and surrounding ocean sediments show continuous glaciation for millions of years. The idea that Antarctica was ice-free just a few thousand years ago contradicts everything we know about Earth's climate history. During the last ice age, which ended about 11,000 years ago, Antarctica was actually more frozen than it is today, not less. There was no period in human history when Antarctica could have been mapped without ice. Second, the supposed match between the Piri Reis map and Antarctica's subglacial coastline isn't actually very good. Modern, accurate maps of what lies beneath Antarctica's ice, created using ice-penetrating radar and seismic surveys, look quite different from what appears on the Piri Reis map. The shapes don't align well, the proportions are wrong, and key geographical features are missing or misplaced. The similarity that Hapgood and others saw, was largely a result of selective interpretation, focusing on a few coincidental resemblances while ignoring numerous discrepancies. So, if the southern landmass on the Piri Reis map isn't Antarctica, what is it? The most likely explanation, supported by most historians and cartographers who have studied the map, is that it represents a distorted and elongated version of the South American coast, possibly combined with speculative geography. In 1513, European knowledge of South America was extremely limited. The continent had only been encountered by Europeans 21 years earlier, and most of it remained unexplored. The western coast was completely unknown. The southern tip of South America, Cape Horn and the Strait of Magellan, wouldn't be discovered until 1520, 7 years after Piri Reis drew his map. Cartographers of this era faced a difficult problem. They had fragmentary information about coastlines from various sources: travelers' reports, sailors, rough sketches, and older maps of uncertain reliability. When compiling this information, they had to make educated guesses about how different pieces of coastline connected and what lay in unexplored regions. The result was often maps with serious distortions, misplaced features, and completely imaginary geography filling in the blanks. The Piri Reis map shows exactly these characteristics. South America on his map is stretched and distorted, appearing to curve to the east far more than it actually does. This eastern curve, combined with the addition of speculative coastline continuing south, creates the impression of a separate landmass that some have identified as Antarctica. Another key piece of evidence comes from Piri Reis's own notes on the map. In several places, he describes his sources and methodology. He mentions using Spanish maps captured from sailors, and specifically references maps showing the western lands, meaning the Americas. Nowhere does he mention Antarctica, an ice-covered southern continent, or any source maps showing lands far to the south. If he had access to maps showing Antarctica, surely he would have mentioned such an extraordinary source. His silence on this point is telling. The map also contains several obvious errors and fantastical elements that reveal its limitations. The Caribbean islands are wildly misplaced. The Amazon River appears to flow in the wrong direction. Parts of the South American coast include illustrations of animals and people that are clearly based on second-hand descriptions rather than accurate observation, including what appears to be a headless man with his face on his chest, a creature from medieval European mythology that was often placed in descriptions of distant, unknown lands. These errors and mythological elements are typical of early 16th century maps, and remind us that Renaissance cartography was as much art and speculation as it was science. The legend of the Piri Reis map also raises broader questions about how historical mysteries get created and perpetuated. Hapgood's interpretation, despite being rejected by mainstream historians and cartographers, was popularized in numerous books and documentaries. It fit a narrative that many people found appealing: the idea of lost ancient knowledge, sophisticated civilizations predating recorded history, and mysteries that challenge conventional understanding. Once this interpretation entered popular culture, it became difficult to dislodge, even though the evidence supporting it was weak. This pattern repeats with many alleged ancient mysteries: an initial claim that sounds extraordinary, popularization through media, and then persistence of the claim long after it has been thoroughly debunked by experts. Modern technology has allowed researchers to analyze the Piri Reis map in unprecedented detail. High-resolution imaging, digital reconstruction of the distorted coastlines, and comparison with accurate modern maps have confirmed that there is no credible evidence the map shows Antarctica. What it shows is a fascinating example of early 16th century cartography, combining accurate information about recently explored regions with distorted projections, speculative geography, and elements borrowed from older, less accurate source maps. It's a historical document that tells us much about how geographical knowledge was compiled and transmitted in the Renaissance, but it doesn't reveal lost ancient secrets or impossible knowledge. The Piri Reis map mystery also highlights the importance of expertise in evaluating historical claims. Hapgood was a historian of ideas, not a specialist in Renaissance cartography or glaciology. His interpretation of the map, while creative, ignored key evidence and made assumptions that experts in relevant fields immediately recognized as flawed. This doesn't mean non-experts can't contribute valuable insights, but it does suggest that extraordinary claims about historical artifacts require rigorous evaluation by people with deep knowledge of the relevant evidence and methodologies. What makes the Piri Reis map genuinely interesting isn't the false mystery of Antarctica. It's what the map actually reveals about early modern cartography, the synthesis of geographical knowledge from diverse sources, the way Europeans tried to make sense of a rapidly expanding known world, and the challenges of representing a spherical planet on a flat surface without modern projection techniques. Piri Reis was working at a pivotal moment in history, when European voyages of exploration were dramatically expanding geographical knowledge, and cartographers were struggling to incorporate new discoveries into existing frameworks. His map, with all its errors and distortions, is a snapshot of that revolutionary moment. The Piri Reis map remains on display in the Library of Congress, where it was deposited as a gift to the American people in 1929. It continues to fascinate visitors and researchers, but for the right reasons. It's a beautiful, complex historical artifact that shows us how people in the past understood their world. It doesn't show Antarctica, and it doesn't reveal lost ancient civilizations, but it does show us something valuable: the constant human drive to explore, map, and understand the world, even when knowledge is incomplete and the tools are primitive. That real story is far more inspiring than any fictional mystery about impossible maps and lost continents. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this exploration of the Piri Reis map and the truth behind its legends, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video. Let us know in the comments what other historical mysteries you'd like us to investigate. Until next time, keep questioning extraordinary claims and seeking evidence-based answers.